Hey guys, I want to talk to you today about the social encounter system. I wanted to go into a little bit more, well, a lot more detail actually about how it works, about the philosophy behind it, because that's really kind of a key thing is the philosophy behind the whole inclusion of a social encounter system. In the old days, there wasn't any social conflict systems in place because in the very, very earliest days of the game, as some of you probably remember, those of you who were there, we didn't need anything. So we thought, right? It was most of the time the conflicts were all violent, in most cases. So we didn't feel the need to have anything other than pure role playing, right? Like I'm sure a lot of us have had those sessions, or at the very least, if you haven't had the sessions, you've heard about the stories of people saying, oh, it was great. We sat down to play the game and no one even rolled a die. It was all just pure role play. And there's nothing wrong with that. God knows I had endless hours of those kind of games over the years and they were super, super fun. However, the goal of this game is to provide a different experience. In a simulation, I want the characters to matter and I want their skills to matter. So what that means is if you're in a physical fight, then the character is going to live or die based on their sword skill, let's say, or their weapon skill, their ability to fight. That is in no way reflective of the skill of the player, obviously, right? If I go into a fight, I'm not relying on my knowledge of how to swing a sword in order to have my character swing a sword, right? The character is the one that actually swings a sword, but I am the one that makes the tactical decision to swing that sword and where to swing that sword and how to approach the enemy and all of that stuff. So in combat, we already have this blending of roleplay and mechanics, right? In a combat, I say, I draw my sword and charge across the room, knocking a table aside into the other guy before swinging my sword, whatever, right? That's me as the player determining what I'm going to do, what my character's going to do. But then I roll dice, and the die roll is based on the 2-hit values that the character has. We do damage based on the weapon that the character is using. None of that has anything to do with me, Trevor DeVal. That has everything to do with Joe the fighter, right? His stats. So already in combat, we have this blending of roleplay and mechanics. So all I'm doing with social encounters, and I'm not the first one to do this by any stretch of the imagination, but all I'm doing with social encounters is taking that exact same philosophy and applying it to a tense encounter where it's a battle of words instead of a battle of blades. And more specifically, I'm designing a system that allows characters to achieve objectives in non-violent means. And yet, to make that achievement of objectives in non-violent means interesting mechanically, as well as allowing people to still role play. So that's something you have to keep in mind right off the bat is you are still role-playing your character, but specifically how it works is, and I'm going to get into this because I'm going to read you a little bit from the book, at least this version, this draft of the book. But how it works is the player role-plays their character in a situation, and whatever words they say, whatever approach they take, will determine the skill that is rolled to see if the character succeeds, okay? So, conflict arena intrigue is what I'm looking at. Currently, this is chapter 10 of the book. Who knows what that'll be when the final layout is done. In this game, there are many conflict arenas. There's combat, there's travel, all that kind of stuff. So this one is conflict arena intrigue. And specifically, we're talking about the social encounters. So, there are many types of conflicts in the world of the Broken Empires. Violent combat is but one way to produce exciting encounters. When the characters are in desperate need to procure the help of an NPC in order to pursue their dearly held goals, or to influence someone important to change their way of thinking about a situation related to the PCs, or to do anything at all that relates to the objectives of the characters, raises the stakes in a non-violent manner, and bears consequences of failure, we can break out the social encounter system. So, the first thing you need to know is you don't use this with every encounter with every NPC. If you're bribing a guard, you don't have to go through a whole social encounter system. You can make a roll, right? And that is totally dependent on the GM and, you know, the context of the situation around the table. There's no need to break out a mechanically complex set of rules for something that could be handled with one roll or no rolls, right? There's nothing stopping a GM from just listening to what the player is saying and going, yeah, okay, that's good enough. He buys that argument and away you go. This system is designed when there is something really at stake, and where the players want to give their characters the opportunity to draw upon their specific skills that they can use in order to achieve an outcome in the way that they want to best do that. So, the social encounter system is designed to turn important conversations and audiences with influential NPCs into tense tactical conflicts that highlight what's at stake for the characters. The players are given the opportunity to make meaningful tactical choices in how they approach each moment in the conversation, in hopes of getting exactly what they want from that particular NPC. And of course, as everything in the game, context is king. Context is king of everything, because it doesn't matter what your rules are. If you are applying them in a way that doesn't make any sense within the given circumstances, it's not going to be satisfying. And that's something that's really important about GMing this game, GMing any game, is always keeping context in mind, because that really is going to determine everything. So, what is of paramount importance for the players is to detail exactly what their characters hope to achieve in the encounter. So the more specific their objectives in that encounter, the social encounter, the better. And crucially, there must be clearly defined consequences for both success and failure. So basically, characters who have nothing at stake and players who are uninvested in the outcome, like you get in one-shots, for example, most of the time, they make for dull, anticlimactic social encounters that can prove frustrating and ultimately a waste of time. So you need to make sure that you know what you want going into the situation. So as this system is really most heavily influenced by the One Ring, specifically the first edition of the One Ring, the example that I use, because this is an example that happened many, many times over the 6-year campaign I ran in the One Ring. Let's say that the players are trying to cross the lands of Bjorn, and they need permission to do so. That's a very simple example, but it works. When they speak to Bjorn, when they take an audience with Bjorn, they have a vested interest in the outcome, and they know what their optimum outcome is. Their optimum outcome is, we get permission to cross the lands by this big scary dude. Now, if they fail at that, there's going to be consequences, right? And they might have to go all the way around Mirkwood or whatever in order to achieve their objectives, and that's a big setback. If they succeed, great, but if they succeed really well, there's going to be more benefits. So their goal is to get as many benefits as possible without risking too much. The social encounter system is a series of extended tests. In other words, tests where you are rolling and accumulating success levels, where the players try to get as many success levels as they can using various social skills and any leverage they have attained before the NPC's tolerance threshold is reached. I should learn how to speak. Reached. What is crucial to understand, and I'm just kind of going through various large sections of this document. I'm going to read the whole chapter to you, but what is crucial to understand about this system is that social skills are designed to accommodate and enhance the role-playing experience, not replace it. You don't roll a social skill to get out of having to role-play your character. You roll a certain skill directly because of how you just role-played the character. So this is never intended to be just a series of die rolls. Okay, I roll my persuade. Did I succeed? Okay, all right. Now you roll your wit. Okay, all right. Now you roll inspire. Okay, all right. We rolled. We got success levels. I guess we win. That's kind of like saying in a fight, the player's just going, I don't know. I'm just going to roll to hit, and it doesn't really matter where I am. I'm not going to make any choices in the combat because ultimately all that matters is what the numbers say. So I'm just going to roll to hit, and if I beat his armor class, I do hit points, and we'll just keep doing that until he gets to 0, and then we can move on. Well, that's not playing the game. That's just rolling dice. So the same thing applies here. You're not just rolling dice. You are playing your character, and the mechanics are facilitating your role-playing choices. So the general structure of social conflicts is this. What I just said, players role-play or otherwise detail what their characters say, and the GM, often with input from the whole table, that tends to happen naturally a lot of the times, decides on the appropriate social skill for them to roll based on their wording and their general approach. We've separated the player and the character, obviously, but we're also bringing them together because the player is the one that picks the approach through their roleplay, and it's the character that's got to make the roll. There was a thing that happened in the YouTuber session of the gloaming pool that I did, where somebody on YouTube said, well, and this was, seeing a clip. This is seeing like a 2-minute clip or whatever. And of course, they took it out of context. They didn't have the context to make a more accurate observation. But they said, well, it looked like Kelsey there made a really intimidating statement. But her, she only had a 10% chance of success. Well, why? And I tried to explain to them, it's because Kelsey, in that moment, played her character very intimidatingly. But the character is no good at intimidation. So that's why she rolled so badly. It doesn't matter what Kelsey's intimidating... It kind of makes me laugh thinking about Kelsey Dion being intimidating because she's like the most lovely person ever. But it makes no difference how intimidating Kelsey is. All that matters is, did she role play the character intimidating? And if so, then it's going to trigger the intimidation skill. If she had played that exact same moment in a more persuasive way, or in a more witty way, or in a more inspiring way, or whatever the ways that she has on her character sheet, then that would have triggered a different skill. So this becomes, and this is really the most important thing about the social system, is that it requires players to be very careful about how they approach what they're saying. Very often you'll have cases around the table where, especially when people are learning this, someone will just start to open their mouth and I'll say, okay, roll intimidate or whatever. And they'll be like, what? Well, I thought I was, what do you mean? And everyone goes, yeah, dude, that was super intimidating. Well, but I'm no good at intimidation. Well, then you should have thought of that before you opened your mouth. That happens all the time. And what you get is sort of this, in my experience, what we've always got is this sort of this beautiful consensus around the table, like, okay, guys, you can't just open your mouth. And the table enforces its own discipline on the proceedings. So now you have players that they might be champing at the bit. Yes, champing, not chomping, champing at the bit to say something in a very particular way, but they know that their character is not skilled in that approach. So either they just shut the hell up, or they try and word it to take a different approach. And it's great because it really elevates the experience of the role play. It really engages the players in those social moments where now they are actively engaged and actively thinking about, how do I get what I want using the tools that I have, which are my character skills. It's a wonderful blending of pure role play and mechanics to generate the result. So also crucially, two more points here. This system, naturally, relies on fair, honest, and accommodating judgment from the GM in interpreting the player's role-played statements and deciding which skill to roll. Let me say that again. This system relies on fair, honest, and accommodating judgment from the GM in interpreting the player's role-played statements and deciding which skill to roll. Crucial. You have to be grown-ups. You can't be a dick, right? Which is the rule in any game, one would hope. You need to be fair and honest about those things, as the GM and as the player. However, in many cases, the whole table often becomes actively involved in carefully listening to and judging which skill they think the player should roll based on how he or she just played that moment in the conversation. So, providing the players are approaching it honestly, a good GM takes their input into account when making a decision. That's what makes the system so fun, too, is that you'll see a character say something, and then immediately the rest of the table will be like, dude, what are you doing? Why did you say it that way? Well, I thought I was... Whatever, it can be hilarious, but it can also be extremely tense, right? If the player characters are engaged in the outcome, or if they have a vested interest in the outcome, which of course they should. There's no point even engaging in the subsystem unless the characters have something at stake, right? But if they do, this becomes a really, really tense situation. It is a type of combat, actually, as long as there's stakes. Now, another hugely important thing to note here is that none of this requires acting or putting on a funny voice or doing an accent or even speaking in the first person. It merely requires an honest attempt by the player to speak the words the character would say in that moment based on what they are trying to achieve socially. So that's pretty crucial. A lot of people have the misunderstanding when they see a system like this. They say, oh, well, so I gotta act all inspiring if I want to make an inspiral. I'm not an inspiring person. No, you don't. But you do have to think about the words you choose. Because when a character is role-playing an inspiring moment, to pick one of the many skills, yes, it's not predicated upon that player's natural charisma to be inspiring. Because again, it's about what the character rolls. So all the player has to do is choose words that are inspiring. And again, I say, they don't even have to do that in the first person. A lot of you don't play in the first person. A lot of you are third person players. You say, Jim the fighter says this. And that's perfectly fine. But you have to choose the words carefully because it's going to be the words that dictate the approach, which the GM will then interpret. Which leads me to the next point here. Obviously, understanding the differences between the social skills is going to be crucial. There are, I think, 9 or 10 social skills, and they are different. Right? They all have specific meanings, which I outline in the book. It's very clear. However, different people will interpret the meaning of social skill applications in different ways. One GM might suggest that telling a simple truth to a general about the impending threat to his army is a persuade, while another GM might consider that a protocol skill. Such is the spice of variety in game mastering. What counts is that the GM remains internally consistent on his or her rulings. If you believe that impersonating a foreign envoy is a perform role instead of a deceive, make sure you don't turn around and demand a deceive role when that character later tries to pass themselves off as someone else. Players require consistent judgment from their GMs in order to make meaningful choices. This is something I go on and on about in the GM section. The GM section of this book isn't just, here's how to interpret certain rules. The GM section of this book is, here is how to run a game in this system, in this world, hopefully allowing you opportunities to try and elevate your own role-playing experiences. I don't mean that to be condescending or one true wayist or anything like that. I'm just saying that it really is designed to be a tool to help GMs think about things in a different way and to try and make them better GMs. I do that all the time. I'm always learning, right? I'm not some guru who knows all the answers, but I do know a few things, and all of those things are in the GM section of this book. So anyway, it goes on into the details about how the system works, but you guys have kind of got a taste of that if you've been watching the show on Me, Myself, and Die. Anyway, I just wanted to get that crucial concept out to you because I think that is, well, it's crucial, but it really is what separates this game from a lot of other games. For those of you who know Burning Wheel is a sometimes absurdly complex system, sometimes, that tries to do a lot of the same things. But where I feel Burning Wheel fails is that Burning Wheel overemphasizes the mechanical aspect while kind of weirdly ignoring the role play in a way. Again, I don't want to come down on Burning Wheel or anything. It's a really, really cool game. But for example, in their Duel of Wits system, which is like a social combat system, you basically plan your attack 3 steps ahead. So you might say, I'm going to use the nomenclature for the Broken Empires, just for purposes of example. You might say, I'm going to do a wit roll, and then an inspire, and then a persuade. And then that'll be compared to what the opponent does in that moment, and then you come up with the result. But the problem with that is that people don't have conversations like that. People don't converse 3 steps ahead. People aren't playing chess. I mean, in a debate, maybe they are, but the fact is a conversation between people is very much like a sword duel, in that if you are planning your next attack 3 steps ahead, you're going to get stabbed. Believe me, I fenced for years. Trust me, a sword fight is not only trying to take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses, it's about responding to what they just did and then trying to, make your move. If you plan your move 3 steps ahead of time, that's a good way to get killed. And so in a social situation, if you're trying to plan your attack 3 steps ahead, that is not taking into consideration the riposte or the response of your opponent, and therefore you could get... So all of that to say that it's a little artificial and a little clunky, whereas my system is designed to be a little more free-flowing, a little more natural, but you do have to get used to it. Like anything in this game, there are rules, and you have to learn the rules and internalize them before the game really starts to flow. I could see a lot of people trying this the first time and going, this is too clunky and weird. But trust me, believe me, when I say that these rules, as soon as you internalize them, everything flows like water. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a little deep dive there on the philosophy of the social system, because it is something that really does separate the game. And like I said, it in my estimation anyway, what I'm tempted to do is to bring pure role play hand in hand with mechanics at the same time, to be able to allow the players and the characters to sort of mix and meld in a very satisfying and tactical way. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Thanks, guys.